Luxury's biggest secret is not craftsmanship or heritage. It is the billions of euros in unsold product sitting in warehouses right now. LVMH alone reported 3.2 billion in excess inventory. Kering hit 1.5 billion. Nearly 5 billion euros of new luxury goods are collecting dust instead of selling. These are not outlet leftovers. They are current season pieces that nobody wants. The same brands raising prices every quarter are quietly drowning in stock they cannot move. Today, we look at 7 luxury names overwhelmed by inventory. And the final brand is facing a buildup insiders consider the biggest warning sign in years. Number 7. Bally. For more than a century, Bally was the definition of Swiss precision applied to luxury. Every loafer, every leather bag, every trench coat felt meticulously engineered. The brand did not shout, it whispered. And that whisper once commanded attention from the kind of buyer who valued craftsmanship over logos. But somewhere between its heritage and the present moment, Bally lost its voice entirely. The signs of trouble came fast in 2024. In November, the company laid off 65 employees from its headquarters in Switzerland. A month later, it announced plans to shut down its Florence production facility, eliminating another 55 jobs. Unions called it unprecedented. A heritage brand that had survived world wars, economic crashes, and shifting fashion cycles was suddenly dismantling itself, piece by piece. Then came the store closures. Boutiques in Atlanta, Costa Mesa, Washington, D.C., and New York's meatpacking district went dark almost overnight. The outlet in Orlando closed permanently. What was once a network spanning over 300 stores worldwide shrank visibly, leaving only a handful of full-line locations still open in the United States. Retailers who once placed orders confidently began hesitating. And the product sitting in those closed stores? It had to go somewhere. Bally's problem is not that its products are bad. They are still beautifully made. The issue is that the brand has been stuck in limbo for years, caught between the understated elegance that built its name and the louder, trend-driven aesthetic the market now rewards. When Regent LP acquired the company in August 2024 from JAB Holding, expectations were high that fresh ownership might bring focus. Instead, the CEO departed within 2 months. Creative direction shifted, and all that uncertainty left entire shipments sitting untouched in warehouses. Retailers do not want to stock a brand that cannot explain what it stands for. Consumers do not want to invest in a name that might not exist in its current form next year. And so, Bally's inventory sits, beautifully crafted and almost entirely unwanted. A brand built on precision is now defined by confusion. But if Bally's crisis is one of identity, the next brand's problem is even simpler. It made something everyone loved, then kept making it long after the world moved on. Number 6. Longchamp. There was a time when the Longchamp Le Pliage was everywhere. Airports, universities, commuter trains, that lightweight nylon tote with the leather trim became the unofficial bag of the practical yet stylish woman. It folded flat, lasted forever, and cost just enough to feel like a smart purchase without being a splurge. For nearly 3 decades, it was the definition of accessible French chic. But here is the thing about ubiquity: it works until it does not. And by 2024, Longchamp found itself facing a strange paradox. The brand reported 20% revenue growth that year, driven largely by Europe and the United States. Online sales jumped 30%. On paper, everything looked healthy. Look closer, though, and cracks appear. The company declined to share performance numbers for China, its former growth engine, where sales had exploded 84% just 1 year earlier. That silence speaks volumes. And while overall revenue climbed, the pace slowed dramatically, from 44% growth in 2023 to 20% in 2024. The momentum that once seemed unstoppable has clearly decelerated. The problem is that Longchamp bet heavily on the Le Pliage remaining evergreen. Production scaled to meet demand that analysts assumed would continue indefinitely. But fashion rarely works that way. The same bag that once signaled understated taste began to feel predictable. Younger shoppers started gravitating toward newer brands with fresher stories, while longtime customers already owned 3 versions in different colors. Longchamp has tried to innovate. Leather versions, limited editions, collaborations with artists. But the core identity remains tied to a product that has become so familiar it borders on invisible. Walk through any major city, and you will see the Le Pliage everywhere, and that is precisely the problem. When everyone already owns your signature piece, who is left to buy the next one? The result is inventory that was supposed to move effortlessly, now stacking up in warehouses. What was once evergreen is starting to feel wilted. But while Longchamp struggles with a product that became too common, our next brand faces the opposite issue. It built its empire on fantasy and found out the hard way that fantasy does not pay the bills anymore. Number 5. Jimmy Choo. There was a time when owning a pair of Jimmy Choos meant something. The crystal embellishments, the sky-high stilettos, the red carpet moments. This was the shoe you saved for, dreamed about, and finally purchased when you wanted to feel untouchable. Sex and the City turned the brand into cultural currency. Celebrities made it aspirational. For 2 decades, Jimmy Choo owned glamour. But glamour has a shelf life. And in 2024, the shelves started filling up with product that nobody wanted to take home. Jimmy Choo's parent company, Capri Holdings, reported that the brand's revenue fell 4.2% in the third quarter of fiscal 2025 to $159 million. That followed a 5.5% decline in the first quarter and a mixed second quarter where retail sales dropped while wholesale barely held on. For a brand that once commanded waiting lists, these numbers tell a painful story. The core issue is simple. Formal glamour does not move like it used to. The modern luxury consumer wants versatility. They want comfort. They want shoes they can actually walk in. The pandemic accelerated a shift that was already happening, turning sneakers and flats into acceptable everyday luxury while relegating stilettos to special occasions that happen less and less frequently. Jimmy Choo has tried to adapt. The brand launched sneaker lines and more casual silhouettes. But pivoting from crystal-encrusted heels to practical footwear is like asking a sports car to become a minivan. The DNA does not translate. Loyal customers came for the fantasy, not the function. And new customers already have plenty of options that were never burdened by decades of red carpet expectations. Meanwhile, Capri Holdings is projecting Jimmy Choo's fiscal 2026 revenue will slide further to between $565 and $575 million, with an operating margin in the negative mid-single-digit range. That is corporate speak for bleeding money, while warehouses fill with boxes of heels nobody is buying. The glamour that built Jimmy Choo has become its anchor. But while Choo struggles to adapt to changing tastes, our next brand never even tried to change. And that safe strategy is now backfiring spectacularly. Number 4. Ferragamo Salvatore. Ferragamo built his empire on a simple promise: Italian craftsmanship, timeless design, and the kind of quiet sophistication that does not need to announce itself. For decades, that formula worked. The Gancino buckle, the Vara pump, the Trifolio bag. These were pieces for people who valued permanence over trends. Ferragamo was the brand you discovered when you were ready to stop chasing fashion and start investing in it. But permanence became stagnation. And in 2024, the numbers exposed what insiders had suspected for years. Ferragamo revenue dropped 10.5% to 1.04 billion euros. Profit collapsed 73%. The CEO departed in early 2025 amid mounting pressure, leaving the brand searching for direction it lost years ago. The problem is not that Ferragamo stopped making quality products. The craftsmanship remains excellent. The problem is that collections started blending together so completely that customers could not distinguish one season from the next. Walk into a Ferragamo store in 2024, and you might struggle to tell if you were looking at new arrivals or pieces from 3 years ago. That sameness creates a devastating psychological effect. When nothing feels new, nothing feels urgent. Customers do not rush to buy because they know the same bag will be there next month, next year, maybe indefinitely. The scarcity that drives luxury purchases simply does not exist. And retailers, sensing this, stopped placing aggressive orders. Why stock up on product that moves slowly when shelf space is finite? The first half of 2025 made things worse. Revenue dropped another 9.4% to 474 million euros. The company swung to an operating loss of 44 million euros after posting a profit the year before. Gross profit declined 15%. And buried in the financial filings was a telling detail: higher provision for inventory obsolescence related to products of previous collections. Translation: pallets of leather goods are sitting in storage, aging out of relevance while waiting for buyers who never arrive. Ferragamo is trying to reset. New campaigns, new product focus, promises of improvement by late 2025. But rebuilding desire takes longer than destroying it. And while Ferragamo struggles with being too quiet, our next brand has the opposite problem. It screamed so loud for so long that everyone stopped listening. Number 3. Versace was never subtle. The Medusa logo, the Baroque prints, the gold chains dripping from everything. This was fashion, designed to announce wealth, power, and a certain fearlessness about being noticed. Gianni Versace built an empire on excess, and after his death, Donatella kept that flame burning for nearly 3 decades. The brand was loud by design, that was the point. But loud stopped working. And in 2024, the silence around Versace's sales became deafening. Revenue dropped 15% in the third quarter of fiscal 2025 to $193 million. That followed a 28% collapse in the second quarter. For the full year, analysts expected sales to decline around 20% compared to the prior year. Capri Holdings, which acquired Versace in 2018 for $2.1 billion, finally threw in the towel in April 2025, selling the brand to Prada Group for $1.375 billion. That is a loss of more than $700 million in 7 years. The problem was a fundamental mismatch between what Versace represented and what luxury consumers now want. The shift toward quiet luxury, those muted tones and invisible logos that signal wealth without announcing it, left Versace's maximalist aesthetic feeling dated. Management tried to pivot, pulling back on the bold prints and raising prices to reposition the brand as more elevated. It backfired completely. As Capri Holdings CEO John Idle admitted earlier this year, they went too far, too fast. Customers who came in for the old Versace left disappointed. New customers they hoped to attract never showed up. The brand ended up alienating both audiences simultaneously, leaving warehouses packed with bold bags and flashy shoes that could not find homes. The wholesale channel collapsed. Stores in prime locations closed. And Prada, a company built on quiet sophistication, now faces the challenge of reviving a brand that represents everything it is not. Versace still has name recognition. It still has heritage. What it does not have is a customer base willing to buy what it is selling. The result is inventory sitting in storage, waiting for a market that has moved on to whispers instead of shouts. If Versace's problem is being too loud for the moment, our next brand faces something arguably worse. It spent years shouting different messages in different directions until nobody could hear anything coherent at all. Number 2. Burberry was supposed to be untouchable. 168 years of British heritage. The iconic check pattern that defined generations of luxury outerwear. a trench coat so legendary it became shorthand for sophisticated style. This was a brand with history that could not be manufactured and credibility that could not be bought. And then it nearly destroyed all of it in less than a decade. In fiscal 2025, ending March 29th, Burberry reported revenue of £2.46 billion, down 15% at constant exchange rates. Operating profit collapsed from £418 million the year before to just £26 million. The company cut 1,700 jobs, approximately 20% of its global workforce. It eliminated night shifts at its iconic Castleford trench coat factory. And it posted its first operating loss in recent memory during the first half of the year before clawing back to minimal profitability by year-end. The damage stemmed from years of confused rebranding. Under previous leadership, Burberry tried to push upmarket into ultra-luxury territory, raising prices dramatically while chasing younger, trend-driven consumers. The strategy alienated its core customers without successfully winning new ones. The brand that once stood for timeless British elegance started feeling like it could not decide whether it wanted to be Hermès or Supreme. That confusion led directly to overproduction in all the wrong categories. Burberry stocked up on products for customers who never materialized. Wholesale revenue cratered, with the company now expecting a 35% decline for fiscal 2025, as retail partners simply stopped placing orders. Why commit to inventory from a brand that changes direction every few seasons? The result is unsold stock-filling warehouses far from any sales floor. Burberry is now forced to discount aggressively just to clear inventory, which further damages the luxury positioning it spent years trying to build. The company has launched a turnaround plan called Burberry Forward, refocusing on its heritage outerwear categories and scarves. But rebuilding takes years, and the stock sitting in warehouses cannot wait that long. Burberry's identity crisis created a production crisis, but our number one brand took things even further. It rode hype culture to the highest heights, then discovered what happens when the hype machine runs out of fuel. Number 1. Gucci. For a while, Gucci could do no wrong. Under Alessandro Michele's creative direction, the brand became the fashion equivalent of a cultural phenomenon. Those double G belts, the maximalist prints, the eccentric, vintage-infused aesthetic that dominated Instagram feeds, red carpets, and every aspirational shopping list. Gucci was not just selling clothes and bags, it was selling membership in a movement. Then the movement ended, and Gucci found itself holding billions in product that nobody wanted anymore. In 2024, Gucci revenue plummeted 21% for the full year. The fourth quarter alone saw a 24% decline. Operating income collapsed 51%. Parent company Kering warned that its full-year operating profit would nearly halve, dropping to around 2.5 billion euros from 4.7 billion the year prior. For a brand that accounts for roughly half of Kering's total sales and two-thirds of its profit, this was catastrophic. The issues run deeper than a fashion cycle shift. When Michele departed and Sabato De Sarno took over as creative director, the brand entered a transition era that left it stuck between identities. Stores were suddenly filled with both new designs and leftover inventory from the previous era. Customers who loved the old aesthetic found nothing familiar. Customers expecting something new found shelves crowded with reminders of what came before. That transition created a perfect storm of excess inventory. Kering reported 1.5 billion euros in unsold stock at the end of 2023, and industry observers noted that Gucci's share of that number was significant. Warehouses filled with product from the hype era, product that once had waiting lists, but now sits waiting for buyers who will never come. De Sarno lasted only 2 years before departing in February 2025. Kering then appointed Demna, formerly of Balenciaga, raising questions about yet another aesthetic pivot that will require explaining to consumers why last season's purchases now feel obsolete. The company has already announced plans to close 80 stores and is reviewing its entire retail footprint. Gucci still has enormous brand recognition. The name still carries weight. But names do not clear warehouses. The bold, logo-heavy products that defined the Michelle era are now stacked in storage facilities around the world, monuments to a moment that already passed. The brand that once seemed to define the future of luxury now cannot escape its recent past. And that is the brutal truth about luxury in 2025. These are not brands that failed because they made bad products. They failed because they overestimated their ability to predict what customers would want, produced accordingly, and got it wrong. The warehouses filling up are not filled with flawed merchandise. They are filled with perfectly crafted items that simply missed the moment. From Bali's identity crisis to Gucci's hype hangover, the pattern repeats. Overproduction, miscalculation, stock that cannot move. The luxury industry once operated on the assumption that scarcity drove desire. Now these brands are learning that abundance destroys it. So what does this tell us? That luxury is not just about quality or heritage or even price. It is about timing. It is about reading the room. And it is about knowing that every item you produce is one more bet that consumers will show up to buy it. These 7 brands made that bet. And right now, they are all losing. If this breakdown surprised you, let us know in the comments which brand you expected to see, and which one shocked you most. Hit that like button so more people can see what is really happening behind the polished storefronts of high fashion. And subscribe so you do not miss the next deep dive into the business of luxury. See you in the next one.